All right, and we're back with another episode of NX Office Hours, where we talk about all things NX. We talk about the community, we talk about developer tools, just trying to make the NX ecosystem better, and features, and lots of other things. Thank you to all the people in the chat room so far. Thanks for joining us again. Have a very special guest. I don't know if I call you a guest or not, but have Victor Savkin with me today. Is some of you might, plenty of you, probably everyone knows who Victor is, but go ahead and introduce yourself, Victor, for
Sure,
people who may not.
sure. So I'm Victor, and I used to be at Google. I used to work on the Angular team with Jeff. 4 years ago, Jeff and I left Google, and we started Narwhal. And the NX was a project we started at Narwhal. And so I like work a lot on NX, like architecting NX, implementing features, and also on Nxcloud.
Cool. Yeah, like I said, thanks for joining. Your reputation precedes you in a good way. I'll just say that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like I said, if we have people in the chat room, if you have questions, we'll get to those later. But the main topic we wanted to talk about today is the NX12 roadmap, which we
Mhm.
recently released. So we're going to kind of go through some of those items a little more in depth and talk about like where we're going with the next version of NX, because there's some good things in there, and wanted to expand on those things.
Yeah, it sounds good. Yeah. Do you want me to cover the points or?
Yeah, we could just start with kind of we talk about NX. We try to zero in a few
Mm-hmm.
features and things we want to focus on
Mm-hmm.
with each release, or even after we go through each major release. So yeah, we can talk about. We can kind of go through the list of things that we have to talk about
Uh-huh.
what we're doing and where we're going.
Sounds good. Sounds good. And so in general, oh, Jeff is there.
Yeah,
That's
Jeff.
not a good.
Jeff
That's not a
already
good.
said that he might start heckling, so it might have a problem. We might have to boot him from the call. But
Exactly. Yeah. So there are a couple of things that are coming in the next 12. In general, I think that we've been doing a fairly good job at like moving forward with an X and an X Cloud without breaking folks too much, right? And we have a motivation not to break folks, right? We work with a lot of large companies that have like massive NX repos, right?
hmm
If you break them, it's usually a headache for us to attend to those breakages, right? So we do our best to not break them, right? To the degree that most folks in the community don't realize, right? When we have a utility that we thought is private deep inside in a file, and now we don't need it, but we will still keep the file that we will never use ourselves for a long time, right?
hmm
Such that if someone deep imports that utility, which they shouldn't, at no point was promoted as public API, right? But the utility works, right? So that's the length to which we go to make sure that we remain like stable, right? And or at least as stable as it can be given our like objectives with the progress we want to make, right? So in terms of features, right? The first thing that we want to do is it's not really a feature, but sort of the maintenance part. Once in a while, we focus more on the state of the repo, how well maintained the repo is, and I want to clarify one of the things I mentioned in the issue regarding X12 is that we try to make the repo represent what we are currently focusing on, right? The core team and the community, and use it as a means of communication, right? When folks want to chat about stuff, they can use issues or discussions, right, to talk to
hmm
each other. And if we have features and stuff or bugs, those are something that we realistically can look at in the next, let's say, year, right? We don't want to have a backlog of 10,000 issues that we know and the community knows no one's going to attend to. All right, there is no reason to have all of them open. So we, put more effort into clean up the repo, fixing bugs. Most of us are working right now on clean up stuff, fixing bugs, resolving issues, and in closing stuff that is no longer relevant or we will likely not attend to in the near future, right? And
Yeah,
in
we like
general, I'm
to.
not.
I was
Go
gonna
ahead.
say Yeah, I know there's been a focus, and we like to do that, like you said, because some things are good to have, but they may take away or may drive away from like the vision of what NX is, or some things can be like extended through the community, and that gives people opportunities to kind of branch out in those ways also, even if everything's not like baked into the platform itself, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, and I understand some folks in the community may not feel they were like, oh, why is my issue no longer there, or it's closed? And the reason why that we would just want to be honest about what we're likely to attend to, right? So it doesn't go into the place like some other open source project where you have, thousands of issues and perhaps thousands of PRs, and then like it's basically becomes like a black hole. You throw a PR in there and it never gets attended to, right? And we don't want to be in the state, right? We want to make sure that if someone sent a PR, we attend to the PR and help folks merge it. If someone opens an issue, we either attend to the issue, fix it, discuss it, or if it's not going to be done, right, it's a feature request, right? It's going to be archived, right? So that's sort of thing number one, right? We want the repo to be healthy, with certain number of bugs. We have internal guides. We're trying to reach the state where we have about 120 bugs across all the plugins we have, right? So it's actually all the plugins, and that's important thing. The next does very many things. We have a monorepo, so the total number of issues is not really that representative of how healthy Nx is, because we add more stuff into the Nx repo, right? As we add more stuff, realistic, we're going to see more issues, right? But we still have fairly ambitious goals on how stable we should be. Okay, that's number one. Point number two, we want to make sure our docs are very good, because we know that a lot of folks like Nx is growing, it's growing very fast. So we assume that a lot of people are starting to use it, right, every year. And more and more people are using it every year, right? Given the exponential growth, right? So the docs are more important. So we put more effort into making good courses that you can find, for example, one on Egghead, the free course. You can go and watch it. It's probably the most up-to-date one. And just refreshing the docs. So Nx.dev's been reworked in the last month. It looks a bit different now, more modern. We fixed a bunch of bugs in the website itself, cleaned it up, and now we're working through refreshing the docs themselves, right? Updating.
That course you mentioned is a Egghead course on scaling with React, right?
Exactly.
One of our developers on the team, Yuri, spent a lot of good work and did a lot of time and effort to put that course together, which is available for free, by the way. So if anyone wants to go check out that Egghead course, feel free to do that.
Yeah, definitely. So if you, and to be clear, even if you don't use React, so we focus on React in that course because we have, React is our focus, and there is a lot of good support for React in Nx. But let's say you're working on Node stuff, right? You're building Nxperts services or Nest services. Well, not everything from that course would apply, but sort of 80% would, right? You can still watch it and still learn all the advanced features we provide. The context will be slightly different, but it kind of applies, right? But we also have specific docs for Node, Angular, and other stuff, right? So the doc stuff is happening right now, and by 12 we should have a refreshed. The website has already been launched, right? The updated version, and by 12 we should have a sort of a better, cleaner experience for folks who are starting with Nx, right? They should see less docs, more relevant docs, perhaps less covering at the same time more topics, but perhaps less in depth, because now we have this issue that some topics aren't covered well, and some topics are covered in a bit too well for getting started. You see pages of detailed description, right? So we want to rework that and move the detailed stuff more into sort of deep dive part of the docs, right? And focus on kind of split your first experience with Nx from, okay, now you know what to do and you want to go deeply, right? I know the docs isn't super excited. Folks who already use Nx. I don't care about docs, right? Because I already know what's going on.
Well, but we have a community full of developers who love docs. I don't know what you're talking about. Some people just, some people just skip right over and try to start doing stuff.
Yeah, but it's more of this, you care about features because I want it to be more powerful. Docs don't make it more powerful, but actually it does matter. As we document things, we also refine some things in Nx because we see some things don't work exactly how we should, right? So we kind of polish a few things. It's actually important for the polish of the product itself, right? Then the biggest thing that's happening right now, so there is repo maintenance, there is docs. The third point is Devkit. So we have finally launched an Nx Devkit, which you can use to author generators and executors, basically build your own plugins, and also author them in the repo itself. So if you have a workspace generator, also known as workspace schematic, right, you can now author it with the new Devkit. And it's documented. We authored the docs already. You can find them on Nx.dev. And we're obviously going to improve the docs. But it's a lot more there right now than it used to be. And we're going to update some of the guides sort of surrounding that area. The guides on creating plugins, the videos, to look at the new Devkit instead of what we used before. And that's sort of the most exciting thing right now, because we essentially, we always wanted to be like a place where the core one is strong, it's good, but really the plugins that make it like a sort of a different experience, right?
Yeah,
Like if
definitely
I,
the plugin ecosystem like I said, allows other people to build on top of like the core and extend without having to roll everything from scratch. We had Devin
Mhm.
on last week who authors plugins for React and Angular and even Capacitor, and he like
Mhm.
he's when I talked to him, he essentially builds on top of the NX plugin system to make his own management of his own plugins easier, which
Mhm.
in turn will it all kind of multiplies from there as far as his users being
Mhm.
able to take advantage of that also.
Yeah, no, exactly. I call an actually VS Code of build tools in the sense that the core is it's still good. Like there is core VS Code, which is a good editor, pleasant to use, etc. Right? But really, it's not because of the core you choose VS Code over I don't know Sublime or something like that, right? It's mostly, and maybe some choose because of core, but for most folks, it's because you can add extensions for your technologies, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
it can accommodate your use cases much better, right? It's similar in here, right? Where the core one is cool, like it's very generic. It's like I see like in the comment section, right? Someone compares Annex to Yarn. That is not like Yarn. It is not like Yarn, but it's not more rigid than Yarn, right? You can do anything you want with the core Annex, no problem. And I'll cover it in a second. Um, so it's generic. It's a plugin that tell you how to do a particular thing, right? So you can, and that's why the plugins I think is the focus for a lot of folks, because that's where you see the differentiation, right? You're like, wow, it's not just faster, because for many projects the faster doesn't matter as much. If you're a small project,
Mm-hmm.
the faster is not really like anything is fast enough, right? It's more where like, oh, there's certain things are much easier for me as a developer, right? There is more affordances given to me, and the affordances are what are provided by plugins, right? So before that, we kind of had docs on writing plugins, so we did support them. Many folks submitted plugins, which is great, and now we are sort of putting a lot more effort into that, right? The new Devkit is much easier to debug. It's much simpler. It doesn't require as much expertise in for example observables, and I like observables, so not to say you can still use observables if you want to, but if you don't know what they are or don't want to learn, that's fine, right? Because I get it. If you're a Node developer, for example, they're not very big in Node, why would you learn something that you don't to
Yeah.
author a simple plugin, right? So that's
Yeah. So
uh go
as
ahead.
far as on the NX Dev Kit, let's dive into that a little bit because you've mentioned it well, as we've been talking here. Like, what was the beginning motivation to for us to kind of move in that direction of NX having its own Dev Kit
Right.
so we can provide some flexibility there.
Yeah, no, like so there are a couple of things that we had in mind. The main one was so the ease of use. So previously, you would author plugins for Next using Angular DevKit. So Angular DevKit, just for clarity, is nothing to do with the Angular framework. Just happened to be
Mm-hmm.
built by the Angular team. Okay, so it's built by the Angular team. It's used by a lot of projects, or by some projects outside of Angular, right? And so it's actually a fairly cool, robust DevKit for building generators. It comes with a virtual file system, et cetera, et cetera, right? It's very nice for sort of advanced folks, right, who know it. It's also not very well documented, right? But if you kind of learn to use it, right, it can be used very effectively to express interesting interactions, right, and write interesting things. We still support it. So if you have something written in Angular DevKit, it will still work, not a problem. Okay. So if you like it, keep using it. We're not by no means forcing you to do anything, right? To switch. But the next dev kit is a much, I won't say much simpler, but it's definitely a simpler
Mm-hmm.
set of APIs. And because I think, I talked about it before, right, is that it's easier for us to uh, to design APIs for public consumption because we actually see people using the APIs. So we had a lot more feedback, right, than the Angular team, which is a lot more sort of inward focused, right? Especially with Angular CLI, where Google doesn't use the Angular CLI. The Angular team doesn't use the Angular CLI. So no one uses Devkit, which Angular CLI used to, to power itself up, right? So I feel like it's just we have an advantage here because we can actually see folks trying it out, a lot more interactions with folks from different communities, from with different experiences, and as a result, the API I feel like is a bit simpler, or quite a bit simpler. It's more debuggable, etc. So it's also well documented right now, right? So it's a separate API, has nothing to do with Angular. They're completely separate. We just happen to support both. So if you have one or the other one, that's fine. And in the future, we can add other ones as well, right? Because different communities have different ways to express the idea of code generation or the idea of executing the task, right? And that's fine. We are going to look at the ones that are very popular and add support for them. It's not hard for us to do that, right? The whole layer that chooses the right Devkit to run your thing in is not the hardest part. Okay, so
right, yep. Yeah, because the main thing, like you're saying, the main thing you want to there are like a few main use cases that you have when using the Devkit or that people run into like inside of their projects or workspaces. Like you either want to generate some files, or you want to modify some files, or you want to like update some configuration or something like that. And like you mentioned before, the Angular Devkit has a lot of tools, but there are a lot of like low level APIs that that could use a higher level API to build on top of, so that you don't have to use as much of the mechanics to be able to get things done. And I think, like you said, Devkit is a way to have like a higher level API that lets you focus on some of those things that you wouldn't have to focus on like outside of your ecosystem. Like you said, you mentioned Node, places where ArcGIS isn't as heavily used and they're just used to using promises or Node APIs, and that gives you that flexibility there. Also with support like backwards compatibility there. So
yeah, no, exactly. And just to be very clear, right? So I don't by no means want to criticize the Angular. Like the Angular is fine. People like using it, they can keep using it, that's fine, right? We just giving people a second choice, right? Now I have the Devkit because we have a particular use case that we have a lot of expertise in. So I feel like it's easier for us to design Devkit for that use case, right? And that's what the next Devkit is, right? And the second reason, that's the one reason basically to make it simpler to better fit our use case, right? The second one is more of a symbolic reason, right? A lot of our users right now, about half Node users and React users, more than half. So it's basically a lot of users who are not Angular users, right? So there are different communities. Now folks use Nx, for example, for Go or Java or Rust, right? Those are smaller groups of users, but still it happens, right? And they feel a bit like, oh, why do I use, because we're Angular. It has nothing to do with the Angular framework, right? It's just not part of the Angular framework, and no, it's nothing to do with frontend at all, right? And originally, actually, it was meant to be a generic Devkit for everything. The name just happened, just almost accidental, right? And they feel like, they have this emotional reaction in a way you would feel if you, let's say, you're writing a Rust plugin and you have a C++ Devkit. It has nothing to do with C++. Just for some reason, someone named it this way, right? And I get it. I get it. It feels a bit weird. I don't feel the same way. Like it doesn't bother me that certain things are named in a particular way. Just could care less. But I know that some people do care, and I just want, if you have this sort of within a company debate, that doesn't, like, I cannot use it when I run my Rust plugin.
They just immediately, after they run install, they just immediately go into the node modules and look for anything any Angular references in there. Like, what is this? Why am I using this?
The same would apply to other things. If you're writing like a Go plugin or a Rust plugin, let's say you're writing microservices, right? If you're writing microservices, then like if you see a React Devkit, you'll be like, okay, what the hell is that, right? You'd still do the same reaction in that you want something neutral, right? For whatever reason, people care about it. So that's sort of the second reason, but it's not the main one. The main one is actually just the ergonomics of the Devkit. I think is better now. And more with is going to come. We're going to update the videos, more docs changes, but it all happens by 12, right? And we migrated like 2/3 of our plugins to our Devkit right now. They work really well. and by 12 everything will be updated. If you are plugin author, right? If you have a third-party plugin, or if you're thinking about writing plugin, just use our Devkit. It's better documented, and just simpler more APIs to use for the types of tasks people tend to do. If you have an existing plugin, you don't have to update. Keep whatever you need to. If you want to use the old API, keep using it. That's fine. Not a problem. We'll support it forever. Okay, forever. So don't worry. It will not go. It's not going to go away. Nothing's going to happen.
This is what happens when people are able to reach into files. This is why we don't. This is why we don't want people to do it, because then those things have to stay out there forever.
Yeah. So that's actually another thing. That's actually a very good point. That if you like previously, we kind of didn't have a true public API for writing plugins. Like you can use those things, or maybe those things, and it wasn't as well outlined, right? And now the Devkit is a public API, right? We will provide guarantees about stability, which is given out users. It will likely be like almost frozen, right? Like that only, because it's like just the type of companies that use Nx. There are small companies on Nx as well, but there are some very large companies who rely on Nx, and we just cannot break them. We just cannot break them at all, right? So, so the Narwhal Devkit is going to be the place that you can import and you can rely on, right? And the other APIs that you secretly used before by deep importing the other packages will remain there perhaps for a year, maybe for more than a year, right? But at some point we're going to remove those. But we'll see. We will gauge with. We have access, or we have interactions with many large companies. But we'll talk to them and see, okay, where are the folks? How reliant they are on those things. Maybe we'll provide affordances. Most likely provide affordances to support all of these usages in your workspace and help you to move to the legit public API. So we will do the best we can, right, to make sure that you have as stress-free environment as it can be, right? Because it's basically our stress. When large companies cannot migrate to the newest version of Nx, they use the old version. The old version doesn't work as well. They send us issues. It's not fun. So we want them to use the new stable API. So we'll make sure we can upgrade them as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think it helps all the way around. Like you said, it helps us from a maintenance perspective, and even helps the clients clients and users of Nx to move to, like you said, the new Devkit API to be able to upgrade, have maybe a slightly easier upgrade path, more support down the road and things like that. So
yeah, exactly.
Something to look forward to there.
Yeah. And if you have feedback about Devkit, please, file issues, open the discussion now, right, on GitHub. We pay a lot of, even though at the beginning I said that we are trying to be more careful with, growing the number of issues, and we're trying to make the issue pool relatively small, we still look at every single one very carefully, examine it, and to make sure that I personally look at every single issue, such that I have a intuitive understanding of what causes trouble, right? And so I can account for that.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I take a look at mostly the Angular ones, but I take a look at the other ones too, just to see kind of what people are running into and things that maybe we can, like you said, clean up with better APIs and docs and things like that. There was one question which is kind of on in the Devkit rel by Nathan Walker. He said, "Do you foresee workspace.json changing a bit over the next year in terms of structure, as far as targets versus architect, things like that?" Because I know that's part of what we support with the Angular with the Nx Devkit, excuse me. As far as making sure that there's some interoperability there.
Yeah, it's a good question. So first, hey Nathan,
Nathan Walker, shout out to Nxperts. Good people over there.
Yeah, and I want to mention just as a side note, right, that how much we care about not breaking people. So we decided to clean up some names in the configuration file, right, and we renamed a few properties, etc. But because we know that people can be upset about it, we had two versions of the configuration. If you choose the version, we in a random formatter, it will format back to the old version of the configuration file. You can go back and forth anytime you want. If you have a utility that you use to read the configuration file via our public API, that's right. And we will massage the data in lots of directions just to give you access to what you used to see in there, right? So that if you write whatever version of configuration file, mix and match, doesn't matter. If you try to update it this way, we will see what version of configuration file you have, and we will try to update it while we're writing the file to disk, right? Such that you can keep your old plugin that uses, for example, old version of the configuration file, all the names and stuff, right? But we will still work, right? We will transform this configuration file in all sorts of directions, right? Just so you're not broken, okay? So it didn't work at first really well. It took a few patch releases to get it right, but it is there. And this is just an example of our dedication to not screwing you over. We still sometimes do. It does happen. We but it's not because we didn't.
It's not intentional though.
Yeah. So it's not. It's not intentional. Yes, it's not because of neglect. We actually try to be careful. Just some things are hard, right? So one of the things we did was we changed the names to make the names more meaningful, right? So like the architect property before didn't make any sense. So now it's called targets because that's where you describe the targets for your project, right, in the configuration file. So Nathan is asking, other changes coming? So the main thing that is coming that everyone was asking for a long time, and I apologize for it. There were technical reasons for why we couldn't do it before. Now we can do it, which is we're going to split or allow you to split the configuration file and have, instead of one giant, if you have a workspace with 1,000 projects, that configuration file is long, okay? So, and now it's going to be much shorter, right? And if you split it into multiple configuration files, so every project can have an next project.json file, which just describes the targets and implicit depths for that project, such that you don't have to, have this uber scary file, right? That rebasing, which is like the worst, right? You're like, I need to rebase in like a 10,000 line JSON file. You're like, So.
Yeah, those merge conflicts are the worst. And when I
know.
Large files like that.
Yeah, so we're basically allowing the split workspace JSON and Nxperts into many files, right? They're small and they're located in your project, and that is going to happen soon, probably by 12, but maybe in like 12.1, right? It really depends on if other higher priority items are going to be done, because it's not very hard to do. Actually, now with the current state of Nx, where we did some rework internally, it's actually really easy to do the split, right? And then again, for you as an end user, it doesn't matter because it's going to be collected back. We will do our best to make sure that whatever you saw before is still what you're seeing, right? But we're going to write different files. There are other side effects that are enabled by that, like caching will be different because now the main configuration file is included in the computation cache key of every project, right? Because we are afraid to do anything clever about it because caching is very conservative. For affected command, for code change detection stuff, or code change analysis stuff, right? We will know which part of the file you're changing, but for caching we don't bother because we're so afraid that we'll screw something over. Like the whole file goes into the cache key, right? And so if you split the file, that's obviously not the case. Now suddenly you have much fewer caching validations, right? There are a lot of nice things that are enabled by splitting the file. And again, I apologize for this stupid large file thing. We wanted to do it a long time. It just we couldn't for some reasons, right? Internally, technically, it was challenging. Now everything is in place. It's really like a day of work kind of situation, right? And probably 2 days of work, right? So it's going to happen either by 12 or like soon after 12, right? And as before, we will do our best to do this conversion for you, or maybe even transforming it back and forth. If you want to say, actually, change my mind, because maybe you had an external, like you wrote a script yourself that reads workspace.json or something, we can probably provide a way for you to split the files and collect them back or something like that. So you can try out a few things and sort of move to the version 3 of the configuration of the files separate, right? But if you don't like it, go back to version 2, right, like it is right now, right? And again, we'll support all of these versions for like basically not forever, but for a very, 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 very long time, because again, the types of companies we interact with, they cannot be changing things super quickly, right? They're usually a few years behind, right? So a few years behind is what we have to support at least, right? So in terms of stability, we are more stable than we would like to, right? But it's just out of necessity, right? We'll make sure all of this works, right? So, but that's the main thing. And I think for many folks, we had so many issues open on GitHub asking, like, can I split the file? Can I do something about this cache validation? It's actually easy to do right now. We'll do it soon, right? Before April.
Yeah, and I think that follows in line with how NX has matured and progressed over time. Like even when of course now NX is built with NX, so we're dogfooding our own product there. But even that had to happen over time where we could get to a point where we could build it as opposed to using a lot of different kind of ad hoc scripts to put the packages and things together.
Yeah.
So
I agree.
This is another one of those things where it wasn't maybe necessarily technically feasible at the time, but now we're in a place where we can do some of those things that make things easier for us, and then make things easier for the people that use NX also.
Yeah, and I think that it's worth stressing that because we've been around for many years, right? It's some things like you can see, okay, there are two versions. It's more confusing. There is an old version and a new version, or some APIs are kind of in progress, right? But I think actually it is the important thing here to note that we can evolve all those APIs, like evolve the tool without breaking everyone every single time, right? Mm-hmm. So of course it's easy to launch a new tool that implements a particular use case and say, look, this use case is new to look how simple it is, right? Oh yeah, because it does that use case and you just build it for that use case, right? Let's talk 3 years from now and see what it looks like. Okay, so so I think that the testament of like the whole core team working really hard, right, is not that we can launch a feature, that we can move folks from feature to feature or from one sort of state of NX to a different one without breaking like very, very large repos, right? Or with like minimum amount of breakage, right? And that's like it's worth stressing, right? That yes, you can like for a particular feature, you can build something new that will make that exact feature today look a bit cleaner. But chances are you're going to have more features that you will need to implement. And then like a few years from now, when that thing accrues all of those things, right? Then you need to compare, right? So at no point you should compare the very new thing against an old thing, right? You should, see how the old thing evolved and what was the breaking changes along the way, right? And I think that we did a reasonable job at not breaking people. We could do better, and now we do better because there are more people using it, so we are more paranoid about, breaking someone to the degree that it's things harder to evolve.
I know that we have a lot of discussions about, like you said, breaking people when we upgrade, just versions of the packages that we promote, like Storybook and Cypress and Jest and things like that, and provide those migrations even from our on our side that help people move to one configuration to another, or things that even within NX like the TS config upgrades, like we wouldn't expect our users to go and have to manually update those files when they update NX to take advantage of new things like that. So
exactly.
A consistent process that we go through to do that.
Yeah, and I think that's. Go ahead, sir.
I was gonna say So we talked a good bit about Devkit and like some of the other things that we're like targeting with NX12. I know we recently released commands that let you add NX to any monorepo, so you can just kind of drop it in and use it. So I guess we kind of piloted this within the Angular ecosystem, right? We had like a tool that makes the Angular CLI faster that kind of does the same thing. But now we've taken that a step further, whether you're using it, you might not even be using Angular at all. Like I said, you might have a node workspace with a few packages in there. You could just drop NX in there.
Exactly.
Yeah, you want to talk about kind of how that came about?
Yeah, sure. There are basically, we have a few of those, I call them converters that you have an existing project, right? And you want to, so I have an existing project, I want to add an X to it. Yeah, there's different stages we can add an X to the project, right? So like you can add the core part of an X, and the core part of an X is like computation caching, where you like rerun the same command and doesn't rerun it, but replace computation from the cache, right? Or figuring out what is affected by your change. So GitHub integration, visualizations, all of this is core, right? It has nothing to do with React, Node, Angular, Java, or anything, right? It's just completely technology agnostic, and it provides sort of mechanisms for you to manage your repo and to build your repo effectively, right? And that core is not, it's actually very easy. Like if you, that's one part, so stage one. The stage two would be, for example, our React plugin or Next plugin. So if you're using, like right now, let's say you have a Yarn workspaces repo, right, with Next.js apps, right? And you could say, okay, I have all those Next.js apps. I would like to use a Next plugin for Next to manage some stuff, such as I can, split those, let's say, large Next.js apps into multiple libraries, so I can scale my Next apps better. So I can build much larger Next apps, right? And that's the second stage, right? The first stage is fairly easy or very easy, right? Depends on your workspace. The second stage can be a lot harder because we try to be more. Let me cover one stage at a time. So the first stage is basically we drop an X, get caching, affected, graphs, GitHub, VS Code, stage one. It was always relatively easy to add, but I get it that if you have never used an X, then knowing how to do it is a bit like it still requires something like, I'm not sure what to do here, right? Because like if you've used it for a while, then you can say, yeah, it takes a day for any repo. Just create a bunch of configuration file, run some stuff, it's working, push to GitHub, done, right? But if you never use an X, then okay, you don't know how to do it, right? It can be confusing. So the command we launched would add an X to monorepo. You can run npx, add an X to monorepo while you are in a monorepo. What it's going to do? Yeah, that command, cool. That's fancy effect. So
we got the command ready to go, so people can use it. I'll paste it in the chat also. But yeah.
If you go to like your Yarn workspaces monorepo, you learn a monorepo, some bespoke PNPM monorepo where you stitch some stuff together using Bash, doesn't matter, right? You just have add with multiple node modules, whatever the thing you have, right? So you go inside and you're just saying, run npx add an X to monorepo. It's going to look at your repo, look at all packaged JSONs, guess where the projects are. You can always change it in the future, but it's going to have a good educated guess, right? And it's going to add 3 dependencies to a package of JSON, which is basically an X. It's going to add an X without plugins to a package of JSON. It's going to add a workspace.json file. We're just going to list the projects it found, and a next.json file, which is basically the same list. Okay, we have 2 configuration files for historical reasons, but it's basically just a list. And the thing that's worth noting is that in an X, if you don't have the targets section defined, this is actually a recent addition, but if you don't have the target section defined for your project, I would just default to npm scripts. Right? You basically see a thing like I have project 1 in this folder. That's it. There is nothing else. And then if that project has the test npm script that say runs the jest, if you run an X test project 1, it's going to run the jest script from within that folder as you do already. It's going to use the same node modules, however convoluted your node module structure is. It's going to do exactly the same thing you commanded before. All right, it just invokes that command. It doesn't do anything else. It just wraps the npm script into an X process that captures the output, captures the asset, stores it, does some code change analysis. Right, and that's sort of the command. So if you run it, it should just work. And I recommend you to go and check out the. If you run the command, it will print a link at the end. Watch it. There's a video in there that sort of shows how easy it is. So in principle, for a lot of repos, you can run it and you get it working, including distributed cache if you choose so, like within 2 minutes. Right? If you have a very convoluted repo, okay, perhaps you need to maybe look at it and see maybe something. You have a secret package to JSON file for the thing that's not part of the repo, something like that. Maybe you have to attend to something, but even that thing is taking it's not super hard, right? So that command allows you to basically transform any monorepo, regardless of what you use, Yarn, and learn PNPM, NPM, doesn't matter. Add an X to it. You still use learn, but we don't remove PNPM or Yarn workspace from it. It's still there, right? Again, an X is not in a position to Yarn workspaces or PNPM monorepos or learner, right? It's not in a position. It's just if you use an X well, at some point you don't find the other things useful, right? But we have clients who use Nx, who say learner, have like enormous repos, right? It works, use it for years, it's not a problem, right? So there is no conflict in there, right? It's more like at some point, if you use Nx well, the learner piece of it becomes unnecessary, right? But if it is necessary for you, if you actually want to have lots of node modules all over the place, which I think is, I'm not a big fan of, right? But if you want to do that, it does work, right? We don't care, right? At the end of the day, we don't manage your node modules, right? We manage your source, dependencies between your projects, and caching, which has nothing to do with how many node modules you have where, right? It's just of no importance to us, right? So that's step number one. So we added this command. It's it's out there. Try it out. It's we tried it on a bunch of workspaces, found a few minor issues. Patched it, released a new version. It's working relatively well. And
I posted the link to the blog post that you wrote in the chat. So if you want to watch that video that Victor mentioned, you can definitely go and check that out and see how easy it is to add it to any monorepo.
Yeah. So it's relatively. I think it's relatively easy, and the point is that the configuration is there. So if somehow we get something wrong based on you can go there and just fix it. It's like the amount of configuration generated is very small, right? If you want to then configure things yourself, go ahead. You can put most of configuration, right? But by default, if you format it well, it can be one line per project kind of situation, right? So now, given that, the second stage is to say, okay, now I have an Nx powered monorepo, right? Perhaps with Yarn or Learn or whatever, right? How can I move further and take advantage of the plugins, right? Because again, I think people don't get it when they haven't used it for a while. But the plugins is where the real power of Nx is, and that you can get a very cohesive, like the dev experience that is very solid, sort of wholesome, where all pieces together work really well, right? And that's where the sweet spot is. So if you have your own bespoke way, let's say, of building React projects or Angular projects, Angular projects don't like to be bespoke because Angular actually is a lot more standardized. But let's say Node projects, you can say, maybe there is a way for me not to have this maintenance where I have to worry about those things, worry about generating different bundles for different types of browsers. Maybe there is something else that can do it for me. Okay, Nx can do it for you. And it's fairly customizable. We go in a direction, we don't believe in eject. I think the eject is a very poor decision in that you either get that or nothing at all, right?
Yeah.
I think that it's good to have, because almost any project don't fit into this, the shell or like
the box, the box that you kind of give them out of the box. They still need some way to extend what you provide without having to like redo everything.
Yeah, exactly. So we do believe in that. Yes, we should give you something out of the box, but if you need to extend, you can extend to a very large degree without having to abandon the plugin, right? So, and then once you go there, you can, okay, now I can build React in this more intelligent way. And for example, it would allow you to build a much larger on Node applications or Angular applications, right? Where you can have like incremental build and stuff, right? Or like it's a Jest or Cypress or Storybook, lots of other things, right? That it's not hard to set up individually. It's more like when you want to have Storybook working together nicely with Cypress, with TypeScript, with some screenshot, and lots of other things. The combination of those things is where it gets a bit tricky, right? Where you see imperfections, where it's like, okay, for some reason TypeScript over here shows an error, but TypeScript over there, like things like that, right? You don't want that to happen. And if you use a plugin, it's not part of your, like you don't have to worry about it, right? We provide a particular experience that we think works well, right? So that stage can take longer because that may require you to change a few things, but really for a lot of small to mid-sized project is not super long, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you like put effort, you can do it very quickly. But the first stage of just adding an X to a repo, it works like, it can work in like within 5 minutes, right? If it's a relatively straightforward repo. Mm-hmm. And then you have, distributed caching, graph, GitHub, etc., right? Working right away. So it's important to differentiate, right? Because the next is two things, right? It's like saying, is VS Code simple? Like, yeah, VS Code by itself is simple, but you can have a million plugins and all of them are very complicated, right? So it's unfair to say VS Code is complicated because there are plugins.
Every person's VS Code is unique.
Yeah, exactly.
A bunch of different combinations of plugins and stuff.
Yeah, it's like bash RC, it's the same. So so I would say that the core of Nx, we added a command to do it. It works well. The second command we added, Katerina, who's a Narwhaler, she added a command to convert the create React app project to Nx. That thing works really well as well. And again, it's like there are different roads. It's like, all roads lead to Rome. So in our case, they all lead to Next. if you
any command you enter just eventually leads you to Nx. So
exactly, one way or the other, you're going to be built with Next. And if you have a create React app, right? That's cool. So it's a good starter way to build React apps. But at some point, you want to take advantage of all the affordances we provide. Run this command to help you with this process, right? And again, if you have any feedback in that, with either of the commands, please, talk to us because we need to know. It's very hard to test those commands well because you have like very different setups, right? That people have. So we try to do our best to like account for variation, but obviously we cannot catch, all weird things. So if you say, we have this setup, it's a bit unusual, but not that unusual, right? We will take care of it and fix it in the command.
Yeah, at least from what I saw, the structure for it and that React application that you create React app, that's a mouthful, is pretty standard. So we were able to kind of build on top of that. Like I said, Jack and Katerina worked on that to get that out. But like I said, if you want to try that out, I pasted the command to add Nx to or convert your create React app workspace into an Nx workspace, so you can get rolling with that too.
Yeah.
So the few other things that I wanted to cover here is, you mentioned this already, but incremental builds. And like I said, we've all run into this where we run into this before. We have large projects and everything is built as one individual unit at the end of the day. You have a bunch of libraries and things, but the application is built as one particular unit. But incremental builds kind of switches that to allow you to take advantage of faster builds and things like that. So what are we doing in that area? We go from one monolithic build to kind of incremental builds and smaller and faster.
Yeah. So we've been focusing on it. Or rather, we've been working on it for a while. And so this, for 12, we're going to make a few more improvements in this area. Basically, the idea is that, as you said, that most of the time people build, let's say, an Angular or React app, because of the way Webpack works, which both Angular and React tend to use, right? All right, it's going to look at all the sources relevant to your app. So in the case of an X repo, if you have, let's say, 2 apps, right? And these 2 apps have, let's say, 50 libraries each or 100 libraries each, right? And maybe they overlap somewhere over here. So some of them are shared between them, right? If you build app 1, let's say app 1 is Angular and app 2 is React, just so like you, could decide which framework to decide to use both, which is not that unusual. In large companies, people use all sorts of things, right? And let's say you're building the Angular one, right? In this case, what happens is that, normally the compiler is going to look at this, the transitive closure that this app depends on, and they're going to compile and build everything at once, right? And for small apps, actually, it provides or medium-sized apps. It provides a good experience because keeping stuff in memory and stuff, it's actually good. Okay, the startup time is like a minute, 2 minutes, but then it's kind of quick. It's good. The problem becomes is when the tab starts growing. Instead of saying like it takes 2 minutes for you to serve it, maybe it takes 10 minutes. 10 minutes already kind of problematic, right? Because you don't want to wait for 10 minutes. You accidentally closed your process, like, okay, now forget it.
That means it's break time to go get a drink.
Exactly. Yeah, it is. It becomes sort of unmaintainable, or like it's very hard to develop this way. And so what folks normally do, because they drank the Kool-Aid of consultants, right? We do consulting, but oh boy, I try to be very cautious of suggesting things that other consultants suggest, like things like micro frontends, right? Which are necessary thing for many projects, not for all of them, and should never be a necessary thing for building a large project, right? Like if you have to deploy independently, split your application to multiple units, deploy every unit, a la carte, that's fine, because the business tells you need to deploy independently, right? That's fine. If your business has a requirement, okay, it can be important for the business to deliver different parts of your app, or if you have an open system, like a plugin system. Of course, all plugins together from all the words from people you don't know can be built together. That's crazy, okay? But if you have like a team of 200 people, mostly in the same area, right? Building one app. There is no reason for you not to deploy it together, right? The business doesn't care, right? So why is it, why would you split it? It reduces extra complexity into like figuring around how to like partition those things, what to share, what not to share, how does bundles come together. Webpack, like the federation, module federation stuff helps, but it doesn't really solve anything, okay? So in this case, actually, you won't build it together, right? Building together has lots of advantages, starting from the simplicity of the mental model to some performance characteristics. The problem is that it just can get very slow, right? Well, I mean, it doesn't have to be very slow, right? The truth is that if you build incrementally, meaning that if you have an app consisting of 50 libs, you don't have to rebuild all 50 libs every time you run something, right? Those libs can be built separately, perhaps on a different machine. That's where the sweet spot is, right? On the CI, for example. So when you put the main branch in the morning and you build in the app, everything's been built by that machine. You can just get the artifacts from the distributed cache, and here you go, the app is running, right? If you change some part of this app, well, you have to rebuild a few libraries that depend on your change, right? And perhaps do the relinking at the top, and it's a much faster process. Okay, so that's sort of the idea behind incremental build. You don't rebuild everything; you reuse the computation done by someone else. So your app is mostly built by other people or by CI, often by CI, right? So that's how it works already. That's fine. There are guides on Nxperts that you can find that show you how to do it for like Angular, React, and I think that's about it. But it works for a lot of things, right? There are some caveats in there on how to remap things correctly in path mappings and how to tell Webpack what's going on. Our plugins do handle it. If you have your own bespoke setup, well, you have to handle it. And I have a video showing how to move from learner to next, and that goes in detail of what kind of things you lose if you do it naively. Right? If you don't pay enough attention to incremental build story, your dev experience degrades because you always go to the wrong folder, right, where things get compiled to. Okay. Anyhow, so that aside, so one part that is left in there, so most of it already is in place. It's cool. We need to extend our incremental build story for other things but React and Angular. For example, Next.js right now, I believe, doesn't have it on, or it's awkward. It's not fully implemented. So that thing has to be like all the plugins we have to support it in the same way. So it's not just Node, Angular, and React, right? But everything we have has to have very consistent support for incremental builds. And right now, at the very top, the linker, the Webpack, still runs every time you change something. That thing is kind of slow. It's still better to have that when you have a large app than to do naive Webpack build, but it's still not the best. So we're going to swap it for something else for dev time builds, right? So you have something like, I don't want to say Snowpack or things like that because I actually don't think Snowpack is necessary.
You already said it. Somebody's writing the blog post right now. The next is moving to Snowpack.
No, but I like Webpack. Webpack is great, So it's more like for some use cases, it's better to do something else, right? And again, it will be an option. As I mentioned many times before, at no point we want to break you. So whatever you used to do will likely work, or have a migration that will make it work. Don't worry, your use case shouldn't be affected. However, right, if you have a very large app and your use case right now is not the best because you're like, okay, that all those JavaScript tools kind of keeps falling apart because you have a super large system, well, those things will get better, right? And again, we face it firsthand because we have companies we work with who have this uber large apps. So we know when shit is getting slow, okay? So it's not hard for us to see when the default JavaScript tools folks use kind of start falling apart, right? And we know how to fix it. Like Google, Facebook, etc. All of them have ways to fix this problem, right? They all do incremental building. They all have a different linker for dev time compared to prod time. So it's not, we don't even have to be very creative in here, okay? It's been done before. It's just for some reason, it's not really got widely spread in the sort of the broader community, right? And I think maybe because fewer people hit those scaling issues, right, in the broader community. Maybe that's why. But anyway, so that's going to happen as well.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I know a lot of people are looking forward to that. We have our first time visitor, Jeff Crosshair, say he just bought stock in Snowpack. So thanks, Jeff. First time caller on the NX Office Hours, Jeff Cross. We appreciate that. Yeah, another thing that's kind of in the arsenal of tools is NX console, and I know we've been making a concerted effort for
Yeah,
folks to use that. So especially if you're using whatever your monorepo setup is, Angular, React, if you have NX, I'm just gonna say you should probably be using NX console also. Uh,
yeah.
so yeah, you want to talk about what we've been kind of doing? Like I said, I know we've been kind of moving it along, increasing support there for people to use it, just because a good important tool to have.
Yeah, yeah. We at some point we sort of it was we have very smart people working on the console, but we didn't. It was always a very like a person or sort of a person and a half, right? So and okay, we want to change it because the console is important. I think that it is important. So NX console is a plugin for VS Code that lets you manage or like interact with your monorepo, helps you like author commands, generate stuff and a lot of other things, right? And I don't believe in this like super heavy IDE experience, right? I do use IntelliJ, but in a very lightweight way, right? Which is akin to what people would think like a text editor, right? I don't like the, you have to go and the IDE experience is very different from your terminal experience. So you're always kind of confused about which one is the right one, etc. Right? And I don't want that to be the case, right? I believe the terminal is good. It's a source of truth, right? So next console, the VS Code plugin is a way for you to author terminal commands and it shows you what it does in the terminal, right? So it's no way IDE experience. So if you're allergic to IDE experiences, me too, we all are, that's fine. We own, it's a consensus, but at least on the team, what we're trying to do is just to make something that is slightly harder to do in terminal, right? Provide a sort of a different view to them, right? Via next console, right? And so anyway, so it is there. Check it out, install it. If you use VS Code, you should definitely use it. We also have not authored by us, like community folks also had plugins for WebStorm and IntelliJ. If you use that, as I do, use those plugins as well. And so this is the first time we have. So Sandy right now on the team, she's working on the console. She's doing a good job, fixing issues, making sure the NX console was back, sort of on being released more frequently with more features, right? And John, another person on the team,
Yeah, so
he's joined.
we're up to two people instead of a person and a half now. So
Yeah,
we're making
no, but
strides there.
yeah, it's good because those are two people who mainly will do that, right? So, and it might be enough for us to move along and make sure that the project is not just it remains stable, but we see new versions of it with new cool features being released, I don't know, every month, right? Instead of before where it was like, well, half a year almost nothing happened. Okay, and it's a small improvements here and there. No, right now it's a focus for us. So by 12, we should fix all the issues that we currently see. There's some minor things here and there, sort of edge cases we'll handle well. Clean up the NX console repo, and move forward and start implementing new cool features, right, in NX console. So stay tuned. I think that's going to be pretty cool. I hope that very soon, right? Every release of NX we have is going to have like a NX console section, which is going to show all the new cool things NX console can do, right? So anyway, so it's just a cool part, given that we always aim to have a more sort of integrated experience in sort of in a good way. Right? So we help you author code, we help you run things, right? We can manage some plugin stuff for you. We have a GitHub plugin that shows you, very helpful for larger repos especially, but for small repos as well. And so you can, so you feel like the experience is good no matter where you are, right? You author your code on GitHub or like review code, you can see a card over there showing you what happened. The editor helps you, etc. Right? The experience is much better if you do it. And you can see it in other technologies as well. If you look at something like TypeScript is only cool. Really, is mainly cool because it has this integrated story. Right? If it didn't have an editor support, okay, it's fine, right? It's still a cool language.
You'd have to have more hurdles to jump over to be productive with it.
Yeah, exactly. So it won over, say, Flow, I think, to very large degree because the integration story, right, of what the whole package was better, right? We try to do the same. That if you use an X, like there is no reason for you not to have a much nicer experience reviewing your PRs, right, and seeing what happened there. than say default Azure, Circle, or whatever you use Jenkins provides. Right?
I mean, who doesn't want to dive into CI logs looking for changes?
Yeah,
No,
exactly.
I'm just kidding. I definitely like the go ahead and plug NX Cloud here. I definitely like the NX Cloud details that you get on your GitHub projects if you use that NX Cloud app.
Yeah.
So if you're using NX, definitely drop that NX Cloud into your workspace and get those NX Cloud run details to get some nice concise information there. Yeah, a couple more things, and then we'll go ahead and wrap up. But we've had some packages that went through an experimental phase, but now we've got some usage, in the community as far as React projects go, and that's mainly the Gatsby plugin and the React Native plugin.
All right.
Can you talk a little bit about where we're going with those as far as maybe things that we're doing now that were mentioned in the roadmap?
Sure. So there are a couple of plugins we always had, or not always, but have had in the main repo for a long time, right? The core React plugin, there are a lot of things that the core React plugin uses, like Jest, Cypress, Storybook, all of the things were in the main repo and the main monorepo. There are advantages to being in the main monorepo, that every time we make a change, we test it across all the plugins. We release the versions so they're consistent. So if you get like 11.3.1 or something like that, well, 11.3.1 is going to work the same way if you it's going to work together well, right? Because we know we've tested that combination really well, right? It should work out like with different versions as well, but because we tested more, like you as a developer just benefit from having our testing this stuff, right? And so Gatsby has been in a separate repo, right, where we tried it out, etc. And now we moved it into the main repo. So now we have React, Next, and Gatsby currently in the main repo. So the sort of React ecosystem stuff, right? So from now on, Gatsby is going to be released using the same versioning as the rest of packages, right? Created by the core team. Every time I make a change, the Gatsby plugin will be tested with this change. So if you want to build like a Gatsby apps in a monorepo, like very large Gatsby apps or whatnot, right? You will have a much better experience. You already have better experience, but you're going to have a much better experience soon, right? For example, the thing I talked about, incremental builds. Well, now because in the main repo it's easier for us to test that for Gatsby. We also have a much better CI in the main repo where we test on Windows with different permutations of npm guards, because all of them work differently. Yeah, so
all these scenarios you got building on Windows, like what package manager are you using? There's all these different things you got to account for.
Yeah, so we test it now, right, for Gatsby, and React Native is coming next. We'll have React Native support already. It's in a separate repo. You can use it. It works well. I'm not a native developer person, but I was able to build something with it. They're still working on it. So Jack is the main person on the team who sort of spearheading that. Yeah, so that's going to go into the main repo as well, and we're also going to get some support
I'm sure Jeff forced you to build something that had pigs in it with your React Native app, right?
Yeah, exactly. Jeff and pigs is MF. So that's coming as well, right? And in general, I want to, so all those plugins, the Gatsby is already in the main repo. React Native is coming soon. And the purpose there is just to make sure that the experience is consistent. That if you use React Native and let's say Next, right? Well, you're building React stuff. Well, we make sure that the combination works well, right? Things like that, right? And in general, I think monorepos are shine the word monorepo is overused, but like Next can shine for lots of different types of projects, right? And one of the interesting things you can do with a tool like Next, right, is that you can partition sort of if you have a system that let's say has different verticals, like the backend and the front end, right? Well, that works well because now you can build them side by side, share code, and do lots of interesting things. But also, if you have a system that has different sort of horizontally different things, like platforms, like web, I don't know, Android and iOS, right? Well, no reason for them to be, if they are together, you can again share some code, and all of them were part of the same dependency graph, build graph, etc. Right? Suddenly, you can actually develop those type of things a lot simpler because that's sort of the core use case of Next, is being able to do things like that, right? That is why I think it's important to have things like React Native or Native Script or Ionic to be supported well, because that's actually where you get a lot of the advantages once you start building different platforms together. Because the code reuse is a big part of all of those tools, right? And Nx allows you to do code reuse very effectively. So anyhow, that's coming in the main repo as well. And the main repo will grow as a result a bit, right? So we'll try to do our best to make sure the CI remains relatively fast. And
we
that
don't
we
want
tend
we
to
don't want things to get slow for us, so we gotta
Yeah.
where the changes and the good stuff is coming in, so we gotta make sure that
Yeah.
stays snappy
Yeah.
also.
Yeah, exactly. But we'll do our best, and I think the result is still better. That we can make sure the package overall works well, right? So anyhow,
Yeah, so we'll wrap up on this last one here. It's been kind of creeping around the interwebs or Twitters or places like that. The Nxperts program is coming soon, and like I said, people have been kind of talking about it here and there. You want to talk about kind of what that is, or what kind of where that came from?
yeah. So I will just say a few words because it is coming soon, but it hasn't come yet. Right? I just want
Yeah.
to make sure folks who are curious that they know we didn't forget about it. It's just like there is a lot going on, right? And we're trying to do our best in attending to many things, not breaking, people, etc., etc. Right? And so, Nxperts is our program for folks who plugin authors, right? Who author like, let's say, popular or very useful plugins. Folks who are like active in the community, for example, write a blog about Nx, or who use Nx for large interesting projects, like Nathan, for example, right? So they can all get together,
I'll throw
with us, right?
Brom B Man. Throw him in there too. He does a lot of
Yeah,
stuff with
yeah.
Nx. Yeah.
Yeah, so folks like that, so we can have a group of, I don't know, 20, 30 people, something like that we can get together and like gather feedback from folks a bit sooner, because there is like we can open an issue, gather feedback, but as you know, and as anyone who managed a popular open source project knows, it's not always as productive as it can be. Like it's easier to get 20 people who really deep in that to give you feedback, because then the quality of feedback is generally higher. It's a lot less of like sort of just bringing up topics that
you don't want to get on the stage wherever to throw tomatoes at you or whatever whatever the saying is about open issues, because honestly it does happen. So
and I'm not even afraid of that per se. It's more over like it sort of dilutes the conversation, so it takes many months to discuss something, right? Where if you had a group of people who are deep in the domain, it can take a few days, okay? And then you have much higher quality understanding of what's going on, right? That's one reason.
Signal to noise ratio is, I think, that's kind of what you're getting at.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it is important, because we don't want to neglect people and say, okay, you can get like provide us feedback, but it doesn't matter, right? So it's better to be honest and say that sometimes we want to get a broader feedback from everyone, but sometimes those like 20 people who really contribute to the community very highly, and like experts in certain domain areas, they can provide much higher quality feedback, and we can talk to them over VC. We cannot talk to everyone over Zoom, for example, right? Because it's just unscalable, right? So it's just a matter of scale. That's one. But second part is they also get like access to cooler new things that perhaps they still try it out and say, okay, we're trying out this idea. We can tell them about the idea, maybe give them a prototype. So they can play around with it and tell us, does it work or it doesn't work, right? So there are a lot of things that we want to do with those, like a close group of people whom we trust and who want to work with us closely, right? And anyway, so that is coming. Kim, who is an Narwhaler, she is going to announce something at some point. So I know she's working. It's just I keep distracting her with other things, right? And it's like I'm sure it would have been out if I wasn't being like, this thing, can we rework that as well? So it's mostly my fault for derailing her all the time, right? But I think by NX12 that is definitely going to be out, and So I hope that
So what you're saying is,
we
every time you start pinging her, we're gonna have to like jump in front of her, like, okay, Victor, you want this Nxperts program to get out or not?
yeah, honestly, that's probably what people will have to do. But it's coming. So we are very excited to, because at the end of the day, we want to share cool stuff with a small, like that might not fully baked, with some folks and say, hey, what about this? Isn't it cool, right? We want to help folks. If someone in that group, if folks who are influential, or if they did something really cool, we want to spread the word around. Say, okay, those folks did something cool, right? How about everyone else? Check out the stuff that they did, right? So it's important to have sort of a smaller group of people whom you trust really well, right? And interact with them sort of differently than you would normally on GitHub, where because we talk to lots of different people whom we don't know well, there is sort of the speed of interaction is not there, right? We have to be a bit more careful. There is a lot of back and forth, trying to understand the use cases, right? Which for a smaller group of folks we wouldn't have to. We would be a lot more efficient. Right?
Yep. Yeah, I think it's a good plan, and I'm looking forward to seeing how that program evolves and the people that are going to be involved. So we'll definitely have more information on that in the coming time, but no hard deadlines. But we're
Yeah,
definitely
no harder.
definitely working on that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
on that note, I want to say thanks to everyone in the chat room. If you want to continue the discussion, we are taking advantage of GitHub discussion. So if you want to talk more about the NX12 roadmap there, or the things that we talked about, we have a place for you to do that. You can also join our GitHub, our Slack workspace, and I'll paste a link to that in the chat room, and also and in the show notes, so that you can, if you're using NX or kind of just getting started, or even if you're more familiar with it, you can definitely help out others there in the chat room. Like I said, we have a plugin ecosystem that people can take advantage of, and we'll have more cool things coming in the future. Just want to say thanks, Victor, for coming on and talking
Thank you,
more
Brandon.
about where we are with the upcoming NX12. And like I said, we have a good, vibrant community, and we want to keep it going. So thanks for coming on, and we will see everyone next time. See ya.